and welcome to season 2 of the Better Not Perfect podcast. Or welcome back if you were one of us who hung out with us in season 1 of the podcast. If this is new to you, welcome first timers. We're so glad that you joined in. I am Dr. Shea Butler, and I am the author of Better Not Perfect: From Hot Mess to Life Success, a woman's guide to learning, loving, and being herself unapologetically. And this is my podcast. And I am so happy to bring to you season 2, which features remarkable women who have, in some way, contributed to my journey towards better. We all need someone to just lift us up, give an encouraging word, a great smile, just some fellowship and some sisterhood. And I am so pleased today to welcome in studio my new friend, Diane Cameron, who's joining me for our season 2 episode. Diane, welcome and thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting me. I am so happy to be here.
Oh, well, Diane, you have such a spirit, just a sweet spirit around you. Diane is an executive in human services, and she's just a beautiful, kind person. You just have a heart for people and a heart to give. And, the minute I met you, we just clicked.
It was mutual.
Yeah, we just clicked.
Yeah.
And I'm just so elated that you are joining me today for this conversation on this journey towards better.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
sure we'll
your
have a
book
lot
is
to
very important.
Oh,
Very important.
well, thank you. I appreciate that. So, I'm going to kick off and I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
When you think about better, not perfect, what does that mean to you?
Well, as soon as I saw that title, one, I thought, must meet this woman. And also it felt like you had found the mantra for many women, but women in recovery in particular, right?
Yes.
Because I've been in recovery decades and I am better, way better,
Yeah.
of course better, but not perfect because nobody is.
Right.
And,
Right.
and perfect, I actually believe, is a little bit on the dangerous side when we start reaching for that. And it's like, but I want to get better tomorrow,
Yeah.
and a year from now,
Yeah.
and 5 years from now.
Yeah.
And you just, like, in those few words, summed it up.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. So, audience, if you've been following along, or if you read the book, or you watched the podcast, listened to the podcast in season 1, then you've heard about my journey and how addiction was part of my journey, and recovery, more importantly, was part of my journey, from alcoholism and from painkiller addiction. And it was a really rough time in my life. Very open and transparent about that in the book. I had to dig deep. I had to find courage. The most difficult thing that I felt in the world, and that was for me to go to rehab and to get the help and support that I needed. So I think one of the reasons that Diane and I clicked, and we didn't even know this initially, was that I was in recovery and she was in recovery. And I know that there are stereotypes about what people look like who are in recovery. And I
Right.
think we defy those
Right.
stereotypes.
Right.
Recovery comes in all shapes, colors, sizes, designer, non-designer,
Right. But we find each other. We do find each other.
We find each other. We find each other. And you're absolutely right. So, Diane, talk to me about your journey.
Well, it's interesting because I think the word perfect is a piece of it, because I was probably using all kinds of things before alcohol, then alcohol, drugs. I have a really strong belief that addiction can be a lot of different things because the addiction's in the person, not in the substance. So I played with a whole smorgasbord. And look, I didn't know this at the time, but looking back, I understood that one of the reasons that it was important to me to look good is because I felt so much shame. So I'm going to look good. So you won't suspect how bad I think I am inside. I'm going to look good. I'm going to be personable and nice, which is parenthetically like, please don't hurt me, right? There's a piece of that. And so I had played with all these behaviors and substances. And then it was another book that actually was my intervention. And it's interesting because we're both writers, but a book, and it was Women Who Love Too Much. Because the part of my addiction that showed on the outside was relationships. And
Wow.
I couldn't hide that because people
Mhm.
saw me, meeting people
Mhm.
and breaking up and getting
Mhm.
together and
Mhm.
breaking up and thought that was the problem.
Mm.
And when I read that book, it was very painful because what she's saying is this typically is a woman or girl who's growing up in a very dysfunctional family. And then she says, if you identify with any of this, you probably have a problem with alcohol, drugs, food, etc. And I just went like pinball machine, bing, 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 bing. Because some of them I knew, and some of them I didn't know it was an addictive behavior, like around some of the food stuff. And it was like, I better call these 800 numbers and started getting help. And I truly believe it was a moment of grace. That was not something I would have done. There would have been too much ego. There would have been too much like, that's other people. I'm not like that. But thank goodness I was at a breaking point that I reached out for help and then found, of course, first, the beautiful women of 12-step recovery, right? Of several different programs.
Wow.
And the women who said, come on, honey, like, come
Wow.
to coffee. We got to talk to you.
Yes, yes, that's definitely something that has repeated itself in my life as I've been on this journey to better, finding women and sometimes men who've
Yeah.
mentored me along through different issues, different
Yeah.
struggles, but certainly through addiction and through alcoholism. And, you know, our stories are a little different in that I wish I could have read a book and it had that intervention. For me, and I share it in the book, it really was a journey of relapse and recovery. I couldn't piece together any real sobriety time.
Yeah.
I was sort of letting life and emotions and part, but what we do share in common is the striving toward perfection or trying to look as if
Right.
you have it all together.
Right.
And believe me, I did not have it all together. And but I wanted to put on that appearance. And what eventually gradually happened, and I make this statement in the book, and some of you may recall reading it if you read the book. What happens or what do you do when God gives you everything you ask for and it's too much? And life was too much for me. My part of my perfectionism was pursue every degree, you know, join every board. Be the Uber mom, the best mom I could be.
Right.
June Cleaver, Claire Huxtable, pick your perfect mom. I wanted to be that person and be the perfect wife.
Right.
Work a full day as an executive, come home, put dinner on the stove, and then be the sexy
That
diva at
part
the end of
too.
the night. And, just trying to be and keep all these balls up in the air. Now, my addiction didn't start there, but that was sort of the middle end of getting to this place where the stress and the pressures of life just really overtook me.
Right.
And the jig was up. I literally, I lost myself, and everything I was trying so desperately to hold on to began to just fall away.
And there's no perspective at that point because I remember that, like, like collecting letters after my name and degrees and because and it's hard to sort out, right? Because that's not a bad thing if your intentions are right or if you're doing it if you're building on good self-esteem. But if you're doing that because you think you're not good enough and this is going to be the fix, but then losing perspectives, people would say to me, Diane, like don't you have enough? Can't you relax? I didn't even know what they were talking about because inside was this voice of like, not enough, not enough. You're bad. He doesn't like you. He won't like you. They won't like you. All those voices.
Yes, yes. With me, it was even, I would strive for awards. I would get an award. And then the minute the event was over, it would go in a draw.
Right.
My degrees went in a draw.
Right.
I'm sure there's some psychosis around that. And I don't know what it is, but I do know that nothing was ever enough.
Right.
And, you know, the attention, the accolades meant I was doing well. And when I was not performing, because a lot of it was about performance, um, then I ran the risk of being marginalized in my mind, or I would feel isolated, or I would feel that I wasn't enough, not doing enough. And a lot of that started for me in my origins as a child who lost, someone very dear to me, my grandmother, at the age of
Mm,
12. And I think that is one of the things that set me on this course of um, grief. And I've learned since today that one of my triggers, as you would have it, is grief and stress. Well, in life, there's no way around people are going to die
right.
in your life. People you love are going
Right.
to die. You're going to be overwhelmed in life, you know? And so I had to learn, and I'm still learning, you know, how to address those things,
Right.
you know?
And that's the gift of recovery is the toolkit that we get.
Right.
And we all wish it like came as a kit with like all the parts in it, but it takes years to get a new tool, practice it. Maybe other women show you how they handled a stressful situation or a bad relationship or a hard job or a hard kid. And then you say, okay, I saw Mary do that. Maybe I can do a little bit of that. But over time, we get these tools.
Right. Right. And part of that is grace for
Yes, it is.
yourself,
Yeah,
and grace for others.
right,
And people would say, I could have grace for everyone else, but I had so little for myself,
right.
and for me, being part of my story, being a teen mom, which I talk about in the book, getting pregnant as a young age, um, and the blowback that came from my community, my church, my friends, my family, some family members, not all. It just made me, I think that was the initial era of shame,
Yeah.
self blame, trauma,
On a
and
young girl,
loss.
a young woman, that's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I felt feelings that I would later say, I will never feel that way again. I will never allow anyone to make me feel that way again.
Yeah,
And we all maybe have those moments. Maybe yours wasn't teen pregnancy. Maybe yours might have been something different. But there may be times in all of our lives. So there are times in all of our lives where we felt rejection, or where we felt lesser than, and it just left an indelible mark in how we saw ourselves.
right,
And so my struggle and my journey really was around learning to forgive this 13-year-old girl who,
13,
yeah, 13.
right,
Now, if you could line up 13-year-olds in front of me and you say, this one did this. And I would say, oh, she's 13.
right,
That one did that. And I'd say, oh, but she's 13. You know, rationally and mentally, I see it and understand it.
right,
But even today, still within my heart, I struggle with um, coming to terms with learning to give her grace, learning to love her. And thankfully now I have a program,
right,
and I have a community of people that are helping me on this journey.
right. I had an incredible therapist early on who did a very similar thing. She said to me, like, do any of your friends have preteen children? Go look at what a 13-year-old looks like. Look at what an 11-year-old looks like, because that's where the trauma was in my family when I was those ages. And I thought I fully expected myself at 11 to be competent, to manage a mentally ill mother, to manage a distant father. And it was like I would look at these little girls and be like, what?
Wow.
But it took a long time to like connect that
Yeah.
part to this woman who thought that was fairly reasonable.
Yeah.
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 And then, of course, to be reasonable, then you need some stuff, or you need some food, you need some drugs, you need some anything to change the feeling, any substance or behavior that will change that feeling.
That's right. I mean, that was my thing. I was addicted to not feeling.
Yep.
I
I
mean,
do think I think that's what it's
that
about.
was really
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I couldn't manage the pain, the anxiety, the stress, you know, and I didn't have to when I drank. When I started, and maybe some people can relate to this. When I started, drinking, it was fun. I was the girl everyone wanted to hang around because I was outgoing, I was confident, I would tell jokes that have people laughing. I don't know, maybe I was funny, maybe I wasn't because we were all drinking. So,
Right.
you know, but whatever it was, I was it girl. And so having that substance made me feel like it girl.
Yeah.
And I began to like that feeling. And then over time, though, I wasn't this joyous it girl anymore. And I went from happy drunk to sad drunk to angry drunk.
Yeah.
And I did not like those people. And I don't know, but I've heard it said that no one stays happy drunk. Everyone dissolves into those other phases.
Right. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's how we can know if it really is an addiction or not.
Mm.
Because I think like college time, that sorts the crowd, right? Some people are experimenting or maybe they're happy and then they change their behavior. We didn't. We kept going.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yeah. So let's talk about the courage to change. Like, your pivotal moment was reading the book and having an aha moment. Mine's was really being confronted by my husband, by my sponsor, by my
Mm,
therapist who said, "Who are you? We do not recognize this person. You need help." And they had to say it a while. They had to say it a while. Um, but I think the moment for me came when, one day I was in the kitchen and I was cooking or doing dishes or something, and I looked over at my children, and there they were, just playing. And I looked at them and I felt nothing. In my heart, these children that I knew I loved,
right.
in my mind, I loved them. In my heart, I felt nothing. And it was a scary moment to me because I've always wanted to be a good mom.
Mm,
I've always wanted, that's something I desired. I mean, being a mom was part of my identity from the age of 14, and I loved it. And it was the moment in which I knew I needed help. Because the one thing, this addiction to not feeling and then having alcoholism be a part of it, when I picked up painkillers, how many know that it doesn't just stop the physiological pain, the physical pain that you may have had that initial prescription for,
right.
but it also dims the emotional feeling.
Right.
So you're not feeling pain, but you're not
You're
feeling
feeling
joy.
anything.
You're feeling nothing. You're not
Right.
feeling joy. You're not feeling happiness. And so that was my moment. And that was the thing in which I had to find the courage. So when you read the book and you saw yourself, what steps did you take? I mean, how did you
I
find that courage?
I truly believe that that was a day, a grace of God, because Diane, with her ego at that time, would never have admitted. But something broke enough that I thought, okay, I'm calling these 12-step programs. And then, surprise, they said, there's a meeting right now. It's like, oh, I wasn't planning on that. I was thinking like next week, next Thursday afternoon, maybe.
Time to talk yourself out of it.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But again, the grace of God, they were like, a live human being answered the phone. A woman said, I'll meet you at that church. I get there, and then that mixed blessing of there's somebody I know, but she's here too.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, okay, that's embarrassing, but it's grace to get connected. But then, and I say this a lot when I speak, my character defects and my weird perfectionism saved me in recovery, because I looked around the rooms and it was like I had been to chamber meetings and Rotary meetings. So it was like, okay, there's a structure here. I'll figure this out, right? There must be an awards banquet at the end of the year. What award can I win? So I'm going to have perfect attendance. They said, read this book. I read 3 books. They said, get a sponsor. I got 2. And so this high need to achieve and be perfect actually helped me because I got in so fast. It was like the weird wanting to be liked, but I got into the culture of recovery very, very quickly.
Wow.
And so like it snuck up on me. And so later, sponsors had to say to me, you don't actually do this. Like doing this perfectly is not like the ultimate plan here. Like, can you sit back, take a breath, stay home on Thursday night, Diane, like watch a television show. Don't be sitting in folding chairs. I had to learn like how normal people did Thursday night or Sunday morning, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But that search for perfection, which was a character defect, actually got me deeply into recovery.
Wow.
Yeah. And kind of like, again, weirdly, wanting people to like me. I want all you people sitting in folding chairs to like me. So let me bring cookies, raise my hand, do whatever I thought was going to matter. But it got me hooked.
Yeah.
In a good way.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I got in there.
I was the total opposite. I was a recovery slacker. Yeah, I was. I mean, I mean, like this perfection gene showed up in some areas of my life, like work and motherhood.
Yeah.
But I talk the talk of perfection in recovery. Like I want to do my steps and I want to get them all done this way. And
Yeah.
and really, I was like, ugh. I was like, I'm busy. I can only make 1 or 2 meetings a week, and my sponsor in recovery had to really kind of like, you got to make more than 1 meeting. It's the
Right.
it's the beginning. So you talked about the
See,
grace
now
of
if we
God.
were in the same meeting, they would have been like, we got to get Shay pulled in. I'd be like, what's her address? I'll go pick her up. Like,
Oh man, I'm better now, not perfect.
yeah. Yeah.
And I have my core group. I usually go to women's meetings in recovery because I just relate, and the women, when you walk in the room, and there's a new woman who shows up, the women grab her,
Right.
and just someone inevitably is going to say, come in,
Right.
you belong here.
Right.
You
And
know?
I am always looking for that woman who comes to a meeting really well dressed and her shoes and her handbag matches, like, oh, you're my sister. Like I know what you're hiding. I
Yeah.
know like you're trying to please us here. And that's okay. That's good in the beginning. But like come
Yeah.
with us.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
and cry until you can laugh at this stuff.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And if you go in and you sit there long enough, you're going to hear your story.
Yeah.
When they would say that to me in the beginning, I was like, what do they mean? But if you keep coming back
Right.
and you keep going to those meetings, even if you're not ready to say that you're an alcoholic
Right.
or that you're an addict, just go. In one program in particular, they say the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking.
Right.
So it's not like you've stopped, but you have a desire to stop.
Right.
So
That's something.
that's something.
Right.
Change starts there. Change starts in the mind,
Right.
and then the heart. And then your behaviors begin to follow,
Yeah.
But if you have a desire to change your life, I would encourage any person, any woman out there who may be struggling with addiction, whether it's food, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, whether it's people, whatever it is, there's a program for you. Find the courage.
Right.
Eventually, I got to a point where I would acknowledge I was a problem drinker, but after things just
But you were the problem.
But I was a problem, right? The drinks weren't the problem. It's the drinks in me.
Right.
Once you put alcohol and Dr. Shay together, that's where the problem was. And I when I talk and I'm out at giving different keynote events and having conversations, sometimes women will come up to me afterward and say,
Tiptoe.
yeah, and
Yeah.
say, I'm glad you said what you said. I'm thinking I may have a problem.
Yeah.
And whew, that is why I wrote this book. That is why I came out so transparently.
Yep.
It took time to get the courage to do that, but the fact that so many people, particularly women, but people struggle in life. And those struggles you heard from Diane and I start in those preteen, teen years, sometimes sooner, but certainly in those formative years, something happens to you
Right.
that creates pain. And there's levels of trauma, but we all feel pain.
Right.
And in that moment, it puts you on a path. And sometimes that path, not always, but sometimes that path can lead to addiction. So if you're struggling, if you have questions, if you're acting out in ways that friends are having conversations with you, loved ones are having conversations with you, you read something, you see something, and you say, oh my God, that's me, and I don't want that to be me.
Right.
We encourage you. We don't promote any program, just find a program, find a person. Google whatever your addiction is, and there'll be a resource that's there for you. And it will literally change your life for the better. Would you have anything to add to that as we
But I
wrap
think
up?
just that, these days, for me, it's 40 years later, there's so many resources, especially there's like all kinds of women recovery programs, not the most traditional one, because some people have, well, I don't know about that issue or this issue. The other thing that I often say to people, it is the best entertainment people think that we're in our little folding chairs, like crying or like sad. And it's like the best laughter I have ever heard is in a 12-step meeting.
Yes, that's so true. And the fun after the meetings.
Oh my
It's like
gosh.
the meetings after the
Yeah.
meetings are the best.
And the deepest friendships you'll ever find.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sisterhoods, bonds
Yeah.
for, a lifetime
Absolutely.
are formed in the rooms, in the recovery rooms.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Diane,
Oh,
for joining me today for this conversation.
well, thank you. And thank you for this book. This book will save women's lives. Absolutely.
Thank you.
And their children's lives, because that's the other thing. As women enter recovery, their children's lives will change.
Yes, yes. And so many of us want that.
Right.
We don't want to be the fulfillment of generational issues.
Right.
We want it to stop with us. We don't want our children to deal with what we had to deal with.
Right.
And you're right, coming into recovery does just that.
Right.
We get to create a new lease in life, not just for ourselves, but for those to come after us.
Right.
And for that, I'm so grateful.
Me too.
So thank you for joining me on this journey to better. And if you would like to hear more about the Better Not Perfect podcast, or if you want to get a copy of the book, it is available on Amazon. And to learn more about where the podcast airs, you can find it on Linktree at better.notperfect. You can find it on YouTube on the Better Not Perfect channel. You can also find it on Apple Podcasts and other podcasts. And if you can find none of those, just go to my website, drshaybutler.com. That's www.drshaibutler.com. And we'll see you next week. Thank you for joining me on this journey toward better.